Hi everyone, it's Abigail with the Creative Bigs, and today I am going to show you how to make this 3D pumpkin in the app Procreate. And just an overview of the things I'm using today. I am using my iPad Pro 12.9 inch. I'm using my Apple Pencil 2nd generation. The app is Procreate. This is my canvas size, and I will be using my 3D Procreate brushes, and those are available in my shop. I will link that all below. And if you want to know the case or the grip, that will also be linked in the description. So check that out. And without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to start off with, I have a new blank canvas and I am using my 3D brushes. I'm using the clay pressure sensitive brush right now, and the brushes come divided into two sets. There's the pressure sensitive and the monoline version. So with the pressure sensitive, if you use light pressure with your Apple Pencil, you have a smaller stroke, but then if you start to use heavy pressure, the strokes get a lot bigger, okay? So especially if I, turn the size way up. And then with the monoline, the width will stay the same no matter how hard I press. So I could be pressing light or really, really hard and the width will stay the same. Okay, so for the first part of the pumpkin, I'm going to be using the pressure sensitive version. And I'm going to have my brush size at, let's say, 20%. So to start, we are going to kind of try to make an oval shape with our pressure sensitive brush. So we're going to pretty much try to keep our pressure the same, but start out a little bit smaller and then make it big so it keeps an oval, right? If we try to do this with our monoline brush, it's just going to look like that, and that's not the greatest. So we're going to go back to our pressure sensitive and we're just going to try to make an oval shape with our brush, and that looks pretty good. So now we're going to add the rest of our pumpkin, and to do that I'm going to add a new layer on top here, and then I'm going to drag so it is beneath the first layer, and then I'm just going to add a few more layers so we can draw each part of the pumpkin on a separate layer. Okay, so what we're going to do for the back sections, the sections that are going to be behind this first one, is we're going to draw a crescent shape. So to do that, we're going to start with light pressure, heavier pressure, light pressure. Okay, and it's going to be a little bit tricky, so you might have to do a few trial and errors as we go along. That one actually looks okay, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do it on the next layer beneath, and I might want to move that a little bit closer. And let me see, I might want to redo that one. That looks better. Okay, so if you want to undo, 2-finger tap to undo, 3-finger tap to redo. Okay, and then on each layer we're going to do separate. And the reason we do this is so that the shading stays the same. So see how the shading is all on this side, so we're going to try to keep it that way. So let me move this over a little bit and we'll do our pumpkin, and I can move this because it's on that separate layer. I'm going to turn snapping off so I can move it exactly where I want, and I might actually make it a little bit smaller. And this is maybe rotate it a little bit, and there we go. And then I'm going to add on this blank layer the final part of the pumpkin and do it a couple of times until I figure out what I like. And so that looks pretty good, and I'm just going to move that in ever so slightly and maybe make it a little bit bigger that way. Okay, so now that our main part of the pumpkin is done, I'm just going to tap and swipe to the right with the rest of the layers, and then I'm going to tap group. So they're all in a group now, and I can move them as a whole. So I'm just going to, with that group selected, tap the move tool, and we're just going to move it down to the center, and you can turn snapping back on if you'd like to make sure it's perfectly centered. And you'll know it's perfectly centered when you see those two yellow lines intersecting. Okay, so we still have a blank layer, and if you don't have a blank layer, you can just add one and drag it to be beneath our group here. And what we're going to do is we are going to tap this kind of lightish brown color here, and I'm going to go over here back to my monoline clay brush, and we're going to use this one, and let's see, that's way too big. So let's go down to, let's see what 8% looks like. Okay, 8% looks good. And so you're just going to draw a really simple stem. You can make it curved if you like. And then we're going to use the liquify tool over in our adjustment menu, and I have it on push. And let's see, let's change this down to like 30%. And then distortion and momentum are at 0 and pressure is all the way up. So what we're going to do is we are going to flatten the stem. by just tapping and dragging outside of the stem inwards. And then we can also make it a little bit wider at the base by just going a little bit out there. And you can kind of do wherever you need it. You can move it wherever you need. And then that should be pretty good. So I'm gonna get rid of that. Okay, so then I'm gonna add a green curly cue right here. And to do that, let's just tap this green color. I have my clay brush selected, and I'm gonna make sure the size is all the way down at the smallest size, 1%. And then you can just draw a curly cue wherever you'd like, and make sure you're on a new layer, because I want this in between. I want it on top of the stem, but beneath the pumpkin layer. Okay, so we're just gonna draw a nice little curly cue, and you can do however you'd like. You can make it however you'd like, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so I like the way that looks. Now what I want to do is, you can just leave it like this, and that's perfectly fine. I want to add a little bit of shading to the pumpkins. So what I'm going to do is not add a new layer. I'm going to go into my group, and we're going to merge a few of these layers together to make it a little bit more easy. So first we're going to take layer 6, and I believe that we want to merge that with layer 4. Yes. So we're going to have these two middle layers together, and then the back layers are going to be on the same layer together. So to do that, I'm just going to take layer 4 and move that to be underneath layer 6, and then take my fingers and pinch those together. And then same thing with layer 5 and 3, we're going to pinch those so they are merged together and they are now on the same layer. Okay, and then we are going to add a new layer above each of those. Okay, so now you have a new layer, and what we're going to do is we are going to turn those into clipping masks. And I'm going to use my gray color, just like a mid-gray tone. And I'm using a soft airbrush. You can find one in the airbrush section. This one's just slightly customized for what I like, but you can use whatever you feel is best. So on these new layers, we have that there's nothing special about those layers right now, right? So if I just draw like that, it's going to show up like this. Now what we're going to do is, with that stroke, just so I can show you, we are going to turn that into a clipping mask. So now it's clipped to this layer and this layer alone. And then we're going to also change this blend mode to linear burn. And I'm going to leave the opacity like this. Eventually we're going to turn it down so it's a little bit less intense. But for right now, I'm just going to clear this layer, and we're just going to gently shade it just so you can see that definition. And then we are going to do the same thing on this layer. I'm going to clip it to this back layer, and then change it to linear burn, and then just shade it ever so slightly. That way you see a little bit more definition. And then we're going to go over here. I'm going to go back up to this top layer, and I'm going to turn this around because it's a little bit easier for my hand to shade this way. And we're going to just do ever so slightly right here. And then we are going to go back down to our bottom layer and do the same thing on this one. And don't do too much, because the 3D brushes have done most of the work for us. We don't have to do too much with shading. But we just want to give a little bit more definition, and then you can change opacity so it's not so intense. And I'm going to go to be about, like, let's say 65%, and then same thing, 65% on this one. And there you have a nice pumpkin. And the last thing we're going to do is add a background. So to add a background, we are going to close this pumpkin group, and we're going to add a new layer and drag it all the way to be at the bottom. And we're going to take this brown color right here, and we're going to tap and drag so it fills that bottom layer. And now we're going to add one more layer above the background layer, and this is going to be our shadow layer. So we're going to have our pumpkin kind of look like it's not just floating in midair. So to do that, I have the color black selected, and I still have that same soft airbrush that I was using before. And so on this new layer, we're just going to kind of draw a line across. Okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect or anything. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go over here to our adjustment menu and tap Gaussian blur, and we're going to blur this. I'm blurring it to about 28%, and then we're going to go over here to our move tool, and with freeform selected, we're going to flatten it a little bit. We can move it up and move it to where we want it to be. So I think that looks pretty good. And then if it's still too dark for you, what we can do is we can lower the opacity by tapping that N. And then let's go, I have it at 85%. Okay, and that is how you make a 3D pumpkin in Procreate. Super easy, super simple. It does not have to be perfect. This is just a fun little drawing that you can do, and I really hope you enjoyed watching. If you recreate this, I would love to see it. You can tag me on Instagram at The Creative Pix, and have fun creating.